Welcome to Backroom Talk.
We're going to be getting into some chit-chat about metabolic conditioning today, but before that, just wanted to chat about a study I pulled up earlier in the week.
The concept of someone being stronger and their self-perceived formidability increasing just makes a lot of sense.
Circuits are really nice because of the constraint of time. Like, you know how much time that 15-minute AMRAP or those 5-minute intervals are going to take your client to complete, and they know too.
This is what I think CrossFit brought to the game, right? And why so many people fell in love with CrossFit, because they started doing these types of aerobic pieces, these circuit aerobic pieces, and they were like, it's fucking fun.
To listen to more Backroom Talk, be sure to subscribe. Learn to design personalized programs with the OPEX system of coaching by heading to opexfit.com.
Well, guys, welcome to another episode of Backroom Talk. Carl, as always, make sure you subscribe. Not you, Carl, but the audience.
Am I subscribed?
I hope you subscribe.
Yeah, I think I'm subscribed.
Guys,
subscribed.
please subscribe on audio and on YouTube, and make sure you leave us a comment or review. We do appreciate that stuff. We're going to be getting into some chit-chat about metabolic conditioning today, but before that, just wanted to chat about a study I pulled up earlier in the week that I shared with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give it like a very, very brief synopsis. We will share a link to it in the show notes, guys, so you can go ahead and read it there if you like. But basically what this study found, it was looking at anxiety in men and women. And typically anxiety is higher in women than it is in men. Now, they looked at characteristics of physical strength tested by grip strength and then self-perceived formidability, and found that there was a mediating effect between gender differences or sex differences in anxiety levels and the physical strength and self-perception of formidability.
Yeah. So I read through it, and it seemed like the anxiety was attached to neuroticism, right? They were like, who's neurotic and who's not. And some things that were interesting in there, it's like women are more likely to score higher on the neuroticism scale than men. We don't know why, right? It's like, is it, role-based? Is it experience? Is it like, we don't know why, but that was something that's been proven to be, the case time and time again. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? It might be beneficial to tell people what formidability means, though, because there's probably some people that don't understand that.
Yeah, I think, and I don't remember exactly how they defined it, but it's someone's perception of their ability to defend themselves and their perception of their ability to like wield force and be safe over others, correct?
Yeah, so formidable just means tough. Like, how
Yeah.
tough can you make something? So like an object can be very formidable if you throw it on the ground and it doesn't break. And then a human can be formidable if they feel like they can handle themselves in like tough situations. And sometimes like exercise can make you more formidable, or experiences can make you more formidable. So yeah, formidability is just the ability to be tough, let's just call it. So yeah, I mean, the concept of someone being stronger and their self-perceived formidability increasing just makes a lot of sense, right? So it's like, if I go out into the gym and I can do like these awesome feats of strength, I'm probably going to feel a little bit better about myself. So therefore, I would feel more, my self-perceived formidability will be higher, and my anxiety will likely be lower because I feel like I can defend myself in a room with 100 people, and I'm like, I'm probably at the higher end of the totem pole physically and toughness wise with these 100 people. So my anxiety levels in those situations will most likely be lower. And the way that they're gauging strength is grip strength, right?
Yeah.
So grip strength has over and over been associated with higher levels of upper body strength. So, if someone has higher levels of upper body strength, they probably understand that. They're probably less anxious. They probably, see themselves as a, higher on that totem pole in that room of 100 people in terms of toughness and being able to defend themselves. So I just think it makes sense that anxiety is lower.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like the connection between those three pieces: physical strength, perception of like, your own formidability, and then anxiety levels resulting. It's very easy to see how those three kind of flow into one another. And it's also just interesting to think about, like, from an evolutionary perspective, right? Typically women, and today and always, women are smaller, weaker, less aggressive than men. Not all women. There's certainly differences.
I don't think that. That's just George.
No, but if we're just looking at, like, all men and all women, the women are going to be less strong and weaker than the men. And from the perspective of being able to, control one's own body and feel safe and protect yourself from attack, to be in a position of power. If you're weaker, you're not going to be able to do those things. And it makes sense that you need to be more anxious and more ready for threat, and being ready to like take off versus stand up and fight if you find yourself in a threatening situation.
Yeah, I mean, N equals 2. Where would you, let's start with you. Where would you put yourself on that neurotic scale? Like, would you be like 1 to 10? Like, where are you at on the neurotic scale?
I'm probably a 7. Like, I'm fairly anxious, definitely have anxious traits, and I'm a fairly neurotic person, but I have watched changes in myself over the last, 10 or so years as I've gotten stronger and had physical training be a part of my life. And
I feel like that you've gone down on that scale as your physical strength has increased?
Yeah, definitely. And it's very easy for me to sit here and say that now in retrospect, but I remember there's kind of like 2 big shifts that have happened for me on a personal level. First was like finding weight training and beginning to lift weights in a Globo gym, and then in CrossFit, and noticing my anxiousness and just, general well-being and feelings of, stress outside of the gym reduce. And then second wave of that happening was really introducing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and learning some self-defense and just feeling like a little bit more capable, whether or not like in reality I could actually, protect myself in a fight. And obviously there's so much more to it than, being able to roll effectively with someone. If someone's carrying a gun or a knife, like, doesn't necessarily mean that I'd be in a better position, but my self-perceived formidability is definitely higher than it used to be, and I have felt anxiety in situations go down because of that.
Got it. Yeah, I think because when we talked about this study on, I think it was on Monday, I thought about it after, and I'm like, like, is there any connections with me personally with strength training and anxiousness going down, or neuroticism going down? And I didn't connect anything with that. But when I first thought about like formidability and being confident in yourself and like your strengths and being able to defend yourself, I actually went back to like 7th grade when I first thought about that. And just like context, I went to a very, very not so good middle school. So there was like always there were like race wars in our middle school. It was like, the Hispanics were over here, the blacks were over here. The whites were over here, and it was just like this all the time.
Sounds like a prison like
It kind of
ground.
was, yeah. Fucking Washington Middle School, not the greatest place. Hopefully it's better now though. But no, I remember, being in 7th, 8th grade, and like there was always like that idea of like, or there was always that thing in the back of our heads of like, are we gonna get into a fight today? Like, is this gonna happen? Is that gonna happen? And I found myself like beginning of 7th grade, I was a fairly anxious kid. I was unsure, uncertain. It's like, man, what's going to happen if, this happens, that happens. And then I like gained this confidence through like actually fighting people and like doing okay. And like, okay, it's like, okay, I can defend myself. And my anxiousness went down dramatically, like overnight, when I felt like, okay, if I got into this situation again, I'm completely confident that I can defend myself. And there's nothing connected to like strength or anything like that, but it was self-perceived formidability, where it's like I felt like I was tough enough to like defend myself in situations where harm could possibly come to me. And I know that has nothing to do with strength training. That has nothing to do with working out or anything like that. But that's the first thing that came to mind. So it makes sense, right? Like the more confident you are in your self-perceived formidability, the less anxious you're going to be in physical altercations. And we're not even getting into, the mental and emotional side of feeling very anxious and stuff like that. But this study didn't really go into that much. It was like anxiety and physical strength and the connections of the two. And I do think there's even without looking at it, and I told you this on Monday, I was like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like someone feeling like they can protect themselves and anxiety going down in situations.
Yeah, definitely. It does just make sense to us. And we can say that, as people who've been in gyms and watched many people go through that evolution where they build physical strength. They are actually literally getting stronger, but they're also feeling better about themselves and more capable. And that's just like one of the things I love about fitness and working in fitness is seeing people go through that. And again, it's not just the my biceps are bigger and I can squat more, but it's actually that perception of themselves feeling stronger, feeling more capable, feeling like they can go out and do what they want. And then also seeing, mental health benefits, anxiety levels, things like that begin to level out or improve as a result of that. I just love that stuff.
Yeah, I think sometimes and I know we don't want to extend this too far, but sometimes we say, like, when we start laying out, like, what are the benefits of resistance training? It's like we blanket it with confidence a lot. And if you were to, like, really dig into what is confidence, this falls inside of confidence, right? So there are some great benefits of it. And we're not saying, like, you should go out and train and get strong so you can fight people and beat them up. But
unless you like that kind of thing, I sure do.
But yeah, just having the confidence that you can defend yourself in those situations is very beneficial to decreasing anxiety.
Definitely.
No one wants to feel like they're the weakest one in a room.
No, I would agree. And it's, in our daily lives, for most of us, is it that important for us to be physically strong and able to defend ourselves? No.
I would say yes. I would say yes.
In your day-to-day,
Yes.
in 99 out of 100 days?
Because you never know what can happen.
You do
right?
never know.
Story, really quick.
Yeah.
We're at the Great Wolf Lodge on Sunday for Colton's birthday party, and another dad was there of the kids, one of his friends, and there was like a scuffle between like the 10-year-olds and like the 14-year-olds because the 10-year-olds cut the 14-year-olds in line. And these are like some pretty big like 14-year-old kids. And the dad just says like nonchalantly like, "Oh man, I hope he doesn't go and get their dads." And I'm like, I don't give a shit if they go get their dads. Like, I'm not afraid of these 14-year-olds' dads. I haven't seen their dads. But no, that's a good point. Like, he probably had a small level of anxiety because he's like, I hope they don't go get their dad. So there's probably something inside of his brain where he's like, I probably am not going to be able to defend myself, right?
Well, that survival instinct is in us, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not our reality is that we have to be able to do that, we do still feel that. Just from, again, an evolutionary biological perspective, like that's inside us as humans.
Yeah, or think about you. Like, you live like in a condo complex, and it's like, let's say you got home at like 9 p.m. and you weren't with Jacob, and you're like locking up your car. Like, there would probably be a level of anxiety if you didn't feel like you could defend yourself at all from you walking from like your carport to your front door. If you didn't feel like you can defend yourself, right? Like, now you're probably like, yeah, whatever. Like, I'll just jujitsu the shit out of somebody if they try to grab me, right? But like, I think that is important on a day-to-day, because I do think people think about like there's some fear that just kind of lives in people because they're thinking about like what could happen. You know what I mean? So I do think it's important.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on. Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that was such a good this is a good conversation too. Yeah, let's hit some
It is.
metabolic
This is our
conditioning.
bread and butter right here. So let's define metabolic conditioning before we get into the conversation, because I feel like this word is like thrown around like crazy. People talk about metcons, people talk about metabolic conditioning, but what are they actually talking about when they say those two words? And I think there's a lot of stuff going on and people mean different things by it. So can we just talk through like metabolic and conditioning?
Yeah.
And what those two words mean?
Yeah, I mean, I would never use it. So I don't know the definition of metabolic conditioning. I think we use it sometimes because other people have like a perception of what it is. Like people think like I'm breathing hard, I'm sweating, I'm working, things like that. But when I think about like the two words independently, conditioning your metabolic system, I think of just like moving and exercising. So like a back squat is metabolic conditioning, technically. A 30-minute AMRAP is metabolic conditioning, technically. Walking around the block is metabolic conditioning, technically. So I think it's just like, I think it's a bit of a buzzword, and we know that, right? Like metcon, metabolic conditioning, that's a buzzword. But to a lot of people that have like an understanding of what it is, or they think about a specific thing, they think about like energy systems training, right? So like doing anaerobic work or aerobic work, and doing that or you're doing that thing for the intention on conditioning that metabolic system. But yeah, I don't really know. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. An important thing I want to pull out there is you said those two words, aerobic or anaerobic. And I think we have to know the difference between them when we're thinking about metabolic conditioning and the result we want to get for someone.
Ooh, yeah, good point. I don't think people think about aerobic versus anaerobic. I think they just think about work.
Exactly.
There's like I'm doing work and I'm sweating while doing that work.
And we believe that you do need to think about the difference between the two and understand them because of, just very different intentions, very different outcomes. You're not going to get the same results from doing aerobic versus anaerobic work when it comes to general health or performance or whatever you might be going after. So before you say, I want to do metabolic conditioning, you have to think about like, what is the metabolic effect I'm actually trying to look for from this? And largely that's going to come down to, again, what that client's goals are. And I think we could very broadly bucket it into two categories of like general health and longevity and trying to get fitter and be healthier. And then looking maybe at like more sport specific for something like CrossFit, functional fitness, because that word metcon gets lumped on that cruise so much.
Definitely.
So general population clients training for longevity, we want an aerobic dose from their metabolic conditioning.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this enough. Like, I don't think we need to go down this rabbit hole. Maybe we'll drop like an energy systems podcast link in the show notes below, guys, so you can go back and watch that if you want to really go into the nitty gritty between aerobic and anaerobic training. But if we're talking about general population and metabolic conditioning, we want to make sure that the work they're doing is aerobic. And the easiest way to kind of describe what that means on a practical level is making it sustainable and making sure that the work that they're doing inside of their metcon is at a sustainable rate, something that they can repeat, and not work that is unsustainable. And when it's unsustainable, that's when we start talking about anaerobic training, which would be more, appropriate for a performance or a sport population.
Yep. And I think it's just for people to understand, because I remember, I think we did something on like EST, and I remember seeing I remember seeing commentary around like someone saying 1 minute can't be aerobic, like what do you like, it needs to be extended out here. It's like that's why we talk about sustainability, because aerobic versus anaerobic is not time dependent. There's some time considerations that go into each one of those things, but they're not time dependent. They're effort dependent, and they're dependent on if you're able to sustain that work over X amount of time when you're thinking about how long you're working versus how long you're resting. So, aerobic work can be 20 seconds or aerobic work can be 16 hours, right? It doesn't really matter. It's what you said. Are you making that 20 seconds sustainable across 75 sets, or are you making that 6 hours sustainable across the entire 6 hours? So that's how we determine aerobic or sustainability.
So, general principle of sustainability has been laid out, guys. And for the sake of this conversation, let's say that we're talking about sustainable metabolic conditioning, doing work with the intention of, training that aerobic energy system. We're not going to really go down that unsustainable athlete route for today. I think a lot of people approach metabolic conditioning like it's something that is, again, the intention of like getting a hard dose from, meant to make clients sweaty. They want to, just work hard and feel like they're doing a lot of work. Often when that happens, you end up going down that unsustainable route and you don't end up getting the, health effects that you're looking for from that metabolic work. So let's talk about like, why is doing random metabolic conditioning not the best approach to it? Like what's the problem with randomness?
Gosh, I don't know if you're taking a chance, right? Like there's some random programs that work for a really long time because people like self-regulate what they're doing in their random work, if that makes sense. They're not spilling over, they're not making the work unsustainable. They have some kind of idea of progression, whether that's I do the same thing every single Monday and maybe I just go a little bit harder week after week, or I add a little bit more time, or I take away time and I increase up, whatever that is, right? So I wouldn't say that if someone knows what they're doing, random can actually work because when they randomly go into the gym on Tuesday, they do what their body tells them to do. Like, but there has to be like a robust level of experience to be able to like randomly go in and get results over a longer period of time. But when you say random, I think you mean just like, we're just slapping this thing on the board and we're just kind of getting after it and we have no ideas of what the intention is behind it. And maybe some days we go a little bit too easy. Maybe some days we go way too hard. But the problem that I would look at overall with random training like that is that there's nothing in mind. You're not doing, like, why are you doing it? And the former point of like going a little bit too easy, someone can randomly go into the gym, do really easy work every single day, and that can be sustainable for the rest of their lives. It's when we talk about people that go a little bit too hard or people that do things that they shouldn't be doing, that's unsustainable. And by unsustainable, I mean they're not going to be able to do it for any amount of time. So that's when you see people, get after it for 8 weeks and then they don't train for the rest of the year. And they're like, okay, next year is going to be my year. And they do it again for 6 weeks and then they don't train for the rest of the year. So that would be the issue with random, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit to that piece that you said about people doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. People doing things in metabolic conditioning that they haven't built up the base to be able to do and to express and do safely and do sustainably for a lifetime. Because like you said, someone can show up to the gym, do something random, do it at a sustainable rate and do that for a lifetime and have great health and great longevity. Like they can do that, but they have to be doing stuff that is within their capabilities. Yep. And if they're extending beyond those capabilities and not aware of what their capabilities actually are, then things are going to get a little bit messy. And so I think people have a greater appreciation for strength training and thinking about like with strength training, we have to start with the basics and then we progress things over time. Like I think there's just more general understanding and appreciation of long-term progression of strength or resistance for people. Not everyone's doing it right, but I think most people understand the concept of like someone should probably be able to do an air squat before they do a goblet squat, before they do a back squat, like that just makes sense to most people's brains. I don't think that metabolic conditioning, whatever we want to call it, gets the same level of appreciation.
Yeah.
Really so often I've done it before. People show up day one and you just give them like a random metcon of a bunch of different movements and expect them to be able to do it back to back because they're just doing work and they're breathing and so long as they're moving it's fine, right? But don't really think about what actually needs to happen before that and what is the base of support in metabolic conditioning that we need to build up before we get someone into doing mixed modal work.
That was a lot. Is that a question?
I don't know if it was a question or not.
Yeah, just kind of coming off that, I think something that comes to mind immediately is people just have to earn their work, right? And it's really clear, and there's a more clear roadmap in resistance training, like you said, right? Like the air squat to maybe you do a goblet squat to maybe you load it up a little bit heavier. But in metcons, people just want to do a bunch of shit, right? So they're not really looking at earning their work inside of that piece that needs to be sustainable, like what we're laying out today. So I think a lot of people just don't have enough patience, right? Because we could be a little bit less patient in resistance training because we know what's coming next week, right? We know that that volume intensity curve is going to go like this, and we can just understand what linear periodization looks like in resistance. In aerobic work, it's the same idea, but it happens a lot slower, right? Like we have to be really, really patient in aerobic work. Just think about, because I know that I know that you think about what you're doing when you do aerobic training. So think about doing cyclical aerobic training, and you're doing an 8-week cycle. How much does it and you're very targeted, right? Like you're like, I'm on this implement for 8 weeks. How much does it really change from week 1 to week 2 to week 3? Not that much. Not that much, right? So that's really difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around, right? It's difficult for people to wrap their heads around, okay, I'm going to do a 20-minute row week 1, and then week 2, I'm going to do the same 20-minute row. But my goal, based on how I'm feeling that day, is to increase my pace by 0.5 seconds per 500 meters. Someone gets on the row, they're like, this is the same shit. Why am I doing the same shit? It's like, because you got to, right? You got to. And what you should actually be doing is doing a 20-minute row at 2 minutes, and you should be doing that for 8 weeks, right? Like, that's the progression. You're just doing it. You're doing more aerobic work on that Monday over 8 weeks, and you're like nailing that 2-minute pace. But a lot of people that are so connected to resistance progression, they're like, I got to change it every week. So I got to go 2 minutes to 158 to 156 to 152. And the person's on the row are like, I can't deal with this shit, right? And as a coach, it's like, it's okay. We all do it, right? Like we all overprescribe at some point. But that's when we need to really understand if we overprescribe, right? Like that's why we have to look at what the client does. It's like ask a question like, ooh, was this sustainable? Did you spill over? Could you progress on this next week? And that's when it gets really tricky with aerobic training, because with ourselves and with clients that we coach, we want to see progression, right? We want to see progression, but we have to be okay with progression in aerobic training taking much longer than progression takes in resistance training. So it's just patience.
It's so funny that you said that, because literally this morning, I've sat down to write the rest of my program for the week, and I'm doing some MAP 4 intervals right now on the C2 bike, the bike erg, and then the assault bike. And I'm at the volume I want to be at. Like, I don't want to do any more intervals that I'm currently doing. My work to rest, I'm not playing with my rest or anything like that. And I was like, what's going to be different this week? Nothing.
Just do it. Yeah, just do it.
Just gonna do it. And it's gonna feel like hopefully a little bit better and a little bit more dialed in than last week. And I'm fine with that on a personal level, but sometimes it can feel uncomfortable as a coach giving that to your clients. You're like, what are they gonna think? Like that I just copied and pasted the workout? Yeah. But no, that
just tell them what you're doing.
Yeah, you communicate the intention.
Yeah, it's funny because I did 15-minute pieces. I'm doing like 15-minute pieces on the bike erg right now, and last week I held a 158.0, and this week I held a 157.8. And I'm like, gosh, that was just so much. But it's all about like, what did you do on Monday? How was your week? That's why aerobic training and aerobic progression is so tricky, right? Because there's a lot of other variables, right? Like we're not talking about 20 to 40 seconds and time under tension per set in resistance, where you can kind of like fake it a little bit, where it's like, yeah, I can increase 5 pounds and I can kind of just like load into my right hip a little bit more. It's like, you can't do that in aerobic training, because that shit doesn't, like, that's truth, right? It's like 15 minutes at like a fairly fast, sustainable pace. You're going to know 2.5 minutes in if you can sustain that pace, and you're gonna know if that was the right pace, right? So yeah, you just got to be really patient and be okay with there being more room for going a little bit faster, a little bit slower in aerobic training, because there's so many variables that we just have to take into account in progression.
We're going to talk through our 4Cs framework of metabolic conditioning in just a second, Carl, to kind of lay out, what does long-term progression look like to getting someone from cyclical work to being able to do mixed work really effectively, if that's the path you want to take someone down. So we will get into that, guys. I would just like to very briefly hit on general principles of progressing aerobic work. Like, what are some of the main considerations that a coach would think about from a global perspective?
Yeah, just think easier to more intense, slower to faster. And that's if you're going down that continuum. If you're training a marathoner, you might be thinking about it the other way, right? Where it's like, I want to go from less volume to more volume, right? So you might be thinking a little bit faster to a little bit slower. So yeah, I think generally though, we need to say slow to fast in aerobic training is a really good idea to think about.
And then we'll get to this, but exercise selection inside of aerobic work, when you start getting fancy and adding in mixed work, we're thinking simple to more complex over time.
Yeah, for that person. Yeah. So, simple for some person could be a goblet squat, and for another person, a goblet squat could be extremely complex. Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, it depends.
So
It all depends on some things that we can't really explain that
All right.
effectively.
End of podcast.
Yeah, let's end this right here.
No, we're going into the 4Cs now. So laying them out, we got cyclical, circuit, chipper, and constant variance. And we're having this conversation today because, well, we wanted to have it, but we're also just released a free course on the 4Cs.
Who was the instructor for that?
I don't know.
Yeah, they crushed.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yeah, really great instructor. Looked super jacked in the videos
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And she looked a little more tan in those videos than she does in real life.
It's the bronzer.
Okay. It's Georgia, if you guys didn't notice.
So, guys,
Emma's in the background like, yeah, she did look more tan, right?
great lighting, Emma. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good. I was like, all right.
We will drop a link for you guys to be able to go download that course for free, so you can get a little bit of education around this stuff under your belt. But let's have a casual conversation around it. So,
Okay. How are we gonna make sure it's casual? What would be
it's always casual.
What would be the other thing?
I feel like it would be uncasual.
Formal?
Formal.
Let's have a very formal.
Very buttoned up.
You need to lose that accent if this is gonna be casual, because I can't relax. I'm like, oh my gosh.
The Australian accent is as casual as it gets.
That's true. Yeah, it's more casual than Emma's.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like very hard for me not to like drop an F-bomb and just be myself. But hey.
Okay, sorry. I always take our conversations a totally different way. Georgia's trying to get down to business here.
Yeah, man, let's get to the point. The
All right,
people
let's
want to
go.
learn.
Yeah.
C number 1, cyclical. We already kind of alluded to this, but we're thinking about, monostructural work would be another word for it. Riding the bike, rowing, going for a run, going for a walk.
Yep.
All that good stuff.
Yep. Cyclical is the truth. Yeah, cyclical is the truth. A lot of people don't want to know the truth. They don't do a lot of cyclical work. Mm-hmm. So cyclical aerobic work it's the gold standard in understanding how good you are at sustainability and just aerobic work. And to take it a step further, long cyclical work is the absolute truth. So yeah, I would say that cyclical is it's the baseline, but it's at the top, right? It's like it's the truth. It's what you should be really good at before you think about anything else. So if you're not very good at cyclical aerobic work, stick there for now, right? Like don't even think about these other things. Just get really good at cyclical aerobic work and do a lot of it.
Yeah, it's gets a rap for being boring, which I think is kind of unfair.
Yeah.
I have really learned to love the quietness of cyclical work, the ability you have inside of it for reflection. And then you can kind of play games with yourself, when you're doing cyclical work where you're not like constantly, moving from thing to thing and like rushing your transitions. You're sitting on that bike and you're, finding different ways to like rationalize the work that you have ahead of you. And I know that doesn't sound fun, but I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm laughing because I'm thinking about how we started this conversation, and I don't know if it's out there, but a study on the enjoyment of cyclical aerobic work and where you are on the neurotic scale. Because I would think that if you're really high on the neurotic scale, that you would not enjoy cyclical aerobic work.
Because of that quiet time.
Anxiety is really high. You're like, oh my God, 159, I need to get back to 201. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like anxious people don't really enjoy quiet cyclical aerobic work. I think I'm a 0 on the anxiety.
Yeah, I think you are. You're the chillest person I know. I'm high.
But I love cyclical aerobic work just because it's like, you said a lot of people find it boring, but on the other side, a lot of people find flow and they can get high on cyclical aerobic work. And you hear it all the time with like, the runner's high and stuff like that. But you can get that same high on, the rower or the skier, maybe not the skier for some people, but on the rower or the C2 bike or the assault bike, right? Like you can really get that dopamine hit from just like being in just such a flow. And usually you see it in those longer cyclical aerobic pieces. And that's what I love about cyclical aerobic work is you kind of just get into a flow, and it's almost like it's like, I don't know if you guys ever feel this, but like when you row, it's almost like you're dancing because you get into a rhythm and you get into a flow. And once you get confident in that rhythm and flow and you feel good, you just want to do it forever. Maybe not forever, but you want to do it for a longer period of time. Yeah, I love cyclical aerobic work. It's
Yeah.
good. It's the truth.
It is
It's where everyone
indeed.
should start.
And it's where everyone learns to pace, right? Like this notion of pacing is something we'll come back to over and over again. One of the amazing things about aerobic work is it like teaches you to see the future. You learn, in this moment here, I'm 1 minute into my 45 minutes or 12 minutes, whatever you have. And because you've spent so much time working on, understanding and appreciating aerobic work and building, your engine and everything like that, you learn to know, I feel like this right now. This is how I need to feel to be able to sustain this out. It gives you the ability to like superhuman see what you're going to feel 30 minutes from now. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, it's also, I don't know if anyone else does this, but whenever I'm doing longer cyclical aerobic work, I think a lot about how I'm feeling. I think a lot about what's burning, my respirations, how my skin feels temperature-wise, how much I'm sweating or not sweating. And I just think about why I'm feeling that way, right? So like, if I'm on the assault bike and I feel like my arms are just like going to fall off, even though I'm going at like a rate that I can sustain for a long period of time, I think about why I feel that way. It's like, is it something I did this weekend? Is it the amount of sleep I got last night? Am I just weak, right? Is this something I need to get stronger at? But on every cyclical aerobic implement, whenever I do an extended piece, I'm always thinking about how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way and strategizing to get rid of that. I don't know if a bunch of people feel that way, but every time I'm on an implement, that's what I think. And it's fun to me. It's like, okay, how is this going to inform what I do tomorrow or the next day or next cycle or whatever that is? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I might be weird. Emma, do you feel that way? Emma's like, no, not really.
No, she's giving us the side eye right now.
She's like, you're a weirdo.
No, I find it like meditative, honestly. Like it's kind of like that, you're going for a walk and you're feeling the wind on your fingertips thing.
Yep.
It's the sensations that I'm feeling on that bike erg that allow me to like just get in my body and like lose everything and like try and lose track of thought because I'm focused on like that one little thing that I'm feeling right then and there.
Yeah. To lose the butterflies for a second, when people feel absolutely terrible is when they feel like they cannot do what they're doing, right? They can't hold the pace. It's too tough. There's like something in their head where they're like, I did this fine last week. I'm going to try to maintain that. And they don't have that idea in their brain where it's like, it's okay to self and auto regulate. So they just like try to hang on, and it is miserable, right? Like there's nothing worse than trying to do sustainable work that you can't make sustainable. So that might be the thing that you're doing. So it's like maybe you shouldn't be doing the ski erg and trying to make that sustainable. Maybe you shouldn't be on the runner and trying to make that sustainable if you haven't like built the volume to do that thing. But that's like the dark side of cyclical aerobic work is when people hate it because they're just like, fucking hurts, and I feel like I can't sustain this pace that I'm supposed to sustain.
Yeah, man, I've been there. I think I shared this a few weeks ago. I had like a full-on panic attack doing some row intervals because I got to the point where I couldn't sustain anymore, but I felt like I had to. So communicate with your clients.
Yeah, I think a good principle for coaches to think about in cyclical aerobic work is, we always talk about like that capabilities line. For cyclical aerobic work, I would always keep it like 2 notches below where you would normally keep it, if that makes sense, because there's not a lot of benefits unless we're talking about performance and like increasing VO2 max, which most people shouldn't really give that they shouldn't put a bunch of let's not get into it. You shouldn't really give a shit about your VO2 max, but unless you're trying to increase threshold, it's like just stay here, like just stay there forever, right? And obviously this line will move up and down based on how they're responding and adapting to that aerobic work, but if you stay here, and I've learned this the hard way, if you stay here, clients will fall in love with cyclical aerobic work because it will feel like flow. It will feel good. It'll feel like, they can do it and perform it at the rate that you want them to perform it at. and it's something that you can kind of extend to the right with them. But if you're always flirting with threshold, it just like no one likes to feel brutal. Well, maybe some people, but most people don't like to feel brutal after like these long cyclical aerobic pieces, because there's a lot of time to think in those. And when it doesn't feel good and you know you have 15 minutes left, it's so easy to just want to shut it down. So give people much less than what they're capable of in cyclical aerobic work.
Good reminder there. So someone spent a whole bunch of time getting really great at cyclical work. The next step in the progression is circuit.
If they want to go there.
If they want to go there, they don't have to. They could live in cyclical forever.
Fuck yeah, live there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, just lift some weights and do some cyclical work. Podcast over.
But hey, we're coaches. We like talking about this stuff. We find it fun. We play with circuit work in our own training, so it exists. We got to talk about it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So this is where we start.
I'm just down for whatever. But yeah,
You're easygoing, Cole.
yeah, fuck
today.
it. Let's end it. Not end it? Okay, that's cool, man. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff. No, I'm kidding.
Circuit. You're taking movements, like multiple movements, and you're putting them in an environment back to back where, let's say someone has a 10-minute AMRAP of 10 cal assault bike, 10 push-ups, and 10 air squats. And they're just doing those 3 activities back to back to back. It could be cyclical in gymnastics. We could add some weightlifting in there as well, depending on the client. But this is our next step in the progression.
Yeah, so I think this is what most people would think is a metcon. Like when people think of metcon, they think of like circuit pieces, chipper pieces, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, this is what I thought. This is what I think CrossFit brought to the game, right? And why so many people fell in love with CrossFit, because they started doing these types of aerobic pieces, these circuit aerobic pieces, and they were like, it's fucking fun, right? It's just fun, right? They're like, I don't feel like I'm going in the Stairmaster and just like doing that for 60 minutes. I'm not like walking on a treadmill. It's like I'm doing this thing that is really engaging and I'm seeing results, right? So I think that's why that's a big reason, not the only reason, why a lot of people fell in love with CrossFit. So yeah, circuits are fun, right? They're really fun. Exercise selection really, really, really matters, and what should be inside of these pieces, and intentions on why someone is doing these pieces also really, really matters.
What intentions could there be? And like, I know that's like a big
No, it's a good
but
question,
what are
though.
the
Yeah.
intentions behind doing it that you'd say are good intentions?
Gosh, I wouldn't say there's any like surface level bad intentions, but the intention should just be clear, right? I mean, let's say you're working with a client and they're like, I really enjoy these circuit type pieces, and they're like, I want to lose body weight, right? It's like you can use circuit pieces to make someone sweat and move and flow and feel really good and burn some calories, right? What if someone said, hey, I want to get really good at these circuit pieces? Now it's like that starts to get really interesting to a lot of coaches, because now they start thinking about progression and what does this look like? What do we put inside of it? How does this week differ from next week? So on and so forth. What if someone said, I just want to do it because I feel really good when I breathe and sweat, right? Like they're not attached to like performance. They're not attached to losing body weight. They just really enjoy doing it. It's like, that's another reason why. But the thing is what's inside of them, exercise selection wise, is going to be the same no matter what the hell their goal is. The way that you progress it is going to be different, but it's going to be the same because it's going to be based on what can they do inside of these pieces to keep them sustainable. So I think that's the most important thing. It's like, no matter what your goal is, what you're doing inside is going to be the same for every person, because it's going to be what they're capable of doing and making sustainable across multiple sets.
Yeah, I know for, clients that I have that do mixed modal circuit style training, for each of those clients, I've got, a running list of the kinds of activities that can go inside of their pieces. Because like you said, can't give every single person the same exercises. That goblet squat you mentioned earlier, that could be a really simple exercise, could be an incredibly complex one and not fit well inside of a circuit for a person.
Yep.
So just got to know your clients and what they can and can't do in an aerobic setting.
Yep. Yeah, I think when we look at like, let's say we're sitting back and we're just looking out of the gym here and there was like 4 people doing circuits out there. What we would want to see in all 4 of those people, no matter what they're doing inside of their circuit, is like that like higher turnover, a flow, this to this to this to this, not like this for 3 minutes and then this for 15 seconds and then this for 2, you know what I mean? Like, you want to design that thing. And that's where the designing of circuits becomes really fun, because you're like, okay, based on, like you're saying, based on my client, my running list of what they can perform, how can I plug this list into this piece to give it that, you know, higher turnover, sustainability, and just like beauty of, like, you know, equal work on each one of these pieces like equal-ish work on each one of these pieces. How can I design that for this person versus this person versus this person? That's where, like, individual design and prescribing this work to, you know, different types of people gets really fun.
It's incredibly enjoyable.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this is the art of coaching, this part right here. Getting the opportunity to do that it's really, really awesome.
Yeah. But dark side of this thing is when you have a client that their list isn't that robust, right? It's like they can do cyclical plus a very small portion of gymnastics or body weight activity. I think coaches fall into a rut of, like, I don't want to give them the same-ish things week over week over week, and I have to get creative, and I just want to throw like a weightlifting thing in there. I think they can maybe do it, but I want to throw it in there for them, right? Because I want it to be fun, and I don't want it to seem like we're just doing like boring circuit work. That's an issue that I think a lot of coaches deal with. Is I understand the principles and I understand what people can and cannot do inside of these pieces, but there's that like little devil on my shoulder saying, put something else in so we can make it fun. You just got to resist that thing and just give people what they can do, and just have a conversation and tell them why they're doing what they're doing.
Definitely.
And also they think about, how do I progress this thing on a week over week basis? And with all aerobic work, progression most times it's good enough just to be doing it. That's it, right? Because we go back to like metabolic adaptation. We'll call it metabolic conditioning. Metabolic conditioning should all be focused on how do we allow this person to adapt to the work that we're giving them week over week over week. And I remember seeing mixed pieces where coaches would just get like, they would get too cute. Like, it's like, okay, this week we're doing a 10-minute AMRAP. We're going to do 60 double unders. We're going to do 15 wall balls, and we're going to do 15 calorie row. Next week, we're going to do 65 double unders. We're going to do 18 wall balls, and we're going to do an 18 calorie row. It's like, you're progressing this like it's resistance training. Don't do that, right? Like, there's no difference between the 15 and the 18 other than they're spending 5 more seconds on the thing, right? So we shouldn't think of progressing circuits like that, like we progress resistance training. Just dose them with things that they can do inside of it, and have a plan based on like what are the characteristics that are going to go inside of that circuit work, and give it to them over a period of time. And if the goal is to get better at, like, let's say you have like this FME, this specific FME that you want them to get better at, and it includes wall balls and rowing, what else did I say? And double unders. Make sure that you're dosing those movements, or movements that will increase the capability to do those movements across that entire cycle before you retest that FME. That was a lot, sorry.
No, it was good. It was good. I mean, rule of thumb, like if you're just looking at your client and trying to figure out, is what I'm giving them inside of their circuit appropriate? Like you said before, look at them on the floor. Are they moving like this at a nice steady pace, not breaking between movements, not like getting bogged down in one area or having to do big fractions and take long rests? You just want to see them flow between movements. And then look at intraset repeatability. Mm-hmm. For that 12-minute AMRAP, have them have their lap timer out on their, watch or their phone, and every time they finish a circuit, hit that lap button and take a look at the end, have them send you that, and make sure that every set inside of that is 2 minutes or whatever it needs to be. And that should give you some good insight.
Yep.
Next up is chipper. Starting to get a little bit more complex. I mean, we could live in cyclical and circuit forever. We don't have to go to chipper, but people want to.
But we're excited, so we're going to go to chipper today.
We're going to go to chipper. And it starts to get a little bit more complex here, because in a chipper where we're doing a list of exercises, so let's say, for example, you've got 50 wall balls, 40 box jumps, my legs, 30 toe bar, 20 power cleans, and 10 bar muscle ups.
Okay.
I don't know. That's our list for today.
Okay.
It's a big, long list of work for people to work through, and they're probably not going from start to finish at a steady pace, completing that whole thing in one go. That set of 50 wall balls, for example, they're going to have to strategize to be able to break them up into smaller sets and do it in a way that they're not affecting negatively what comes next. So they're not totally gassing themselves with a wall ball, and they have to take 30-second break before they get to their wall balls. And throughout those wall balls, before they do those box jumps, and then throughout the wall balls, we don't want to see them do like 35 reps and then not be able to complete the next 15 because they're so tired. They're going to have to, break them into sets of 12 or whatever it is they decide is appropriate, and have small little even breaks between the work.
Yep. Yeah. Exercise selection still matters a lot. Muscle endurance should be the limitation in chippers. If a client, let's say you give a client this big long, let's say that chipper, the 50 down to 10, and they responded back to you and Coach RX, and they're like, how should I approach this? I would delete it and just go back to circuit because they're not ready, right? So there would have to be, for clients to approach chippers effectively, they have to know them. They have to understand themselves and their own muscle endurance limitations, right? So like when you put out those 50 wall balls and, someone knows in their brain, like my max unbroken set of wall balls is 60. Maybe I shouldn't try to go unbroken on the 50 because now I'm going to have to walk around the gym a couple times, take a couple sips of water before being able to even do a box jump. We don't have the ability to have that lap timer and we're like, boom, this is sustainable, right? We can repeat the work and ensure that it's sustainable. That's one way to do it. But we should be able to do one chipper with a client that can effectively do it. We should be able to do one chipper or one piece of work and trust that the client will just self-regulate how to break up all those reps and finish at a higher effort than they started, if that makes sense. So you're not just hitting singles on the bar muscle up to finish that chipper. There should be some idea of how they should attack each piece of work, right? So when you say that immediately, and this is just how my brain works, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go 30, 20 on the wall balls, the box jumps. I'm just gonna go steady pace, boom, step down on what were the 30?
The 30 was a toe to bar?
Yeah, the toe to bar, I'm gonna go 10, 10, 10. Because I'm probably thinking about the bar muscle up and how that's so similar to the toe to bar. What was it, 20?
Power clean.
The power clean, depending on the weight. I'm probably just going to go singles, really fast singles. And then on the bar muscle up, I'm probably just going to go straight through or go 5-5, right? So it's people should start thinking about that when they see chippers. But if they're like, I have no idea, let me ask my coach how to approach this, just take the chipper. Don't do chippers with them.
Yeah. You said it before as well, exercise selection matters. I just ran through a fairly advanced list of exercises right there. That's where my brain went with chipper. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, when I've seen chippers inside a CrossFit, especially in testing, that's what they look like.
Yeah, shit has to look sexy, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to see 100 fucking air squats.
But it could be.
Yeah, it could be.
That chipper could start with a 100-cal assault bike.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Definitely could be, getting the same result from that work, but having less complex exercise selection inside of there.
Yeah, I think I'll speak for myself. My brain goes to a little bit more advanced exercise selection in chippers, just because when I think of who's doing chippers, I think of a little bit more advanced of a person.
Yeah.
Just because, and work is work, right? I think it's cool for people to experience all kinds of work, but I don't know I'm not giving like these big robust chippers with super simple exercises to like everyone and saying like, okay, get after it, because those people are probably people that couldn't approach it like in a way where they can start to self-organize how they're going to break that work up. So I would fall guilty of that as well. As when I think of chipper, I think of more complex exercises.
Yeah, and I mean, reality as well is like from a program design efficiency perspective as a coach, and then for the less advanced client who's looking at their program and who doesn't have the ability to know, this is going to take me 17 minutes because I know I'm going to take this much time on this thing and this much time on this thing. Circuits are really nice because of the constraint of time. Like, you know how much time that 15-minute AMRAP or those 5-minute intervals are going to take your client to complete, and they know too.
But there's nothing better than being in like a MAP 5 piece and you're like, I'm going to do 4 time pieces with this client and I want it to be around 3 minutes. And you just, and they give you results on Monday, or you look at the results and it's like 258, 259, 301. And you're like, you just want to be like, yeah, that was, but they wouldn't get it, right? So you just kind of pat yourself on the back in those pieces.
Definitely have done that before. Or, the MAP 6 work ended up being 7 minutes long instead of 5.
Yeah. You're just
Done
like, oh,
that
yeah,
too.
that was the point. Yeah, we're trying to do that.
And that's why you learn and adjust your program every single week, guys.
Yep.
So after chipper comes constant variance, and this is where stuff gets real sexy and fancy.
Yeah,
So, constant variance would be, again, similar like chipper style list of activities. Let's call it 15 wall balls, 15 kettlebell swings, 15 burpees, 15 power snatches.
Hang power snatches.
60 double unders.
Yeah.
Is that everything?
That's everything. Did you say wall ball?
I said wall balls
Okay, yeah,
originally.
that's it.
In our CV tester. Did I say
Yeah.
box jumps too?
No, that's what you missed.
Box jumps are
box
in there also. Anyway, guys, you've got a list of activities. You're doing that list 4 times, so chipper style, and you're going to do it for a certain number of rounds. But every time you do it, the order of the activity or the order of the exercises inside is going to flip. So instead of starting on wall balls, next round you're going to start on hang power snatches and so on and so forth.
Yep.
And man, that like variance inside of there adds a whole other element where people have to learn to pace and know what other activities are going to feel like done in different orders. Muscle endurance becomes, different as you see, a hang power snatch into a kettlebell swing versus a hang power snatch into a burpee, and you feel the differences there. Just far more complex.
Yep. Yeah, this is it's a cognitive piece as well, because there's a level of learning from the work that you just did 5 minutes ago and being able to replicate that pace, and how it's going to feel when you go from A to B to C. So this gets rid of that, right? It's almost like a new piece every time, and you're just like figuring it out as you go. So it is a truer test of sustainability, because the work stays the same, the volume stays the same, but the order and how one thing leads into another changes. The highest order version of this would actually be, and we used to do this on site when we had a bunch of athletes, is we would do CV work, but they wouldn't know what they were doing. So it would be like, okay, we're doing this, and then you're resting 5 minutes, and then totally new list, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to rest 5 minutes, totally new list, you're going to do that. And sometimes we kept the exercises the same and we would switch up the order, and other times we would do similar exercises, volume would be the same, similar exercises, but we would the exercises would be different. So it was like they were just doing over 3 sets. Let's say there were 5 exercises per set. They're doing 15 different exercises throughout those 3 sets. But maybe they'd be going from like a dumbbell front squat to a wall ball or something like that. So it would stay the same-ish, but we would just change it. And that was really fun to see how people would respond to those. But you have to know the athlete, or the athlete in this situation really well to understand that list that you talked about of exercises that they can make sustainable. So there's not a huge variable of doing a 30-pound wall ball versus dumbbell front squats. You're yeah, that's the same thing in terms of what they're capable of. So that was always fun.
When you say that right there, we talked about having that list of exercises for your client earlier on. it becomes obvious as you talk it through, like someone who doesn't have a big list of exercises that they can make sustainable, that can go in their metcon circuit, they're not going to be doing constant variance where,
No.
you know, there's a bunch of different activities that they need
Yeah.
to be able to do, but they actually can only do 3 activities effectively in a circuit.
We could just like CV aerobic work. It's just CV. Yeah, it's just aerobic work, CV'd.
15 cal bike, 15 cal ski,
Yeah.
15
Or we
cal
could do
bike
like,
erg.
yeah, or we could do like single modality cyclical work. So it's like 500 meter row, rest 2 minutes, 1,000 meter assault bike, rest 2 minutes, 500 meter ski erg, rest 2 minutes. And then you're just like, that's set 1. And then you're like varying up. I don't know. I'm creating shit, guys.
Don't get too cute, guys. No, but constant variance is right at the end of the progression. But just because we say progression doesn't mean that everyone needs to progress there. Again, it's fun for us to talk about this stuff and to think about, you know, theoretically, what does it look like to progress someone to the highest level of mixed modal metabolic conditioning, the ability to do, you know, different activities in an aerobic setting. But just like biggest takeaway from this chat is that not everyone needs to go there.
Yeah, and gosh, sometimes it's beneficial to know the nuances of what's higher in the progression to understand why you wouldn't give that to, you know, any of your clients. So, yeah, I think it's always fun to just chat through it.
Definitely. So 4 C's, we walked through cyclical, circuit, chipper, and constant variance. Anything to add on those guys?
No.
Or girls? I don't know.
Yeah, but those women. Yeah, they could be women too, right?
They could be.
Guys, girls. I don't know. We'll save that one for next week.
will.
We'll talk about the gender differences and
Metabolic.
aerobic pieces.
I don't know. I'm delirious now.
Yeah. Georgia smoked some something.
This
today.
is not true. Please don't put that out there. Nothing bad going on here. But no.
Is smoking bad? Like smoking
no,
some
there's
things
nothing.
bad?
There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just
Okay.
don't really partake. I don't.
I'm embarrassing Georgia. I'll stop.
You
She's
are. I'm
turning
going red.
She's turning the color of her shirt.
So we walked through 4 C's. Moving on. Let's just like bring it back to what we talked about. And I had a note here down for myself about just why we have to lose our biases when it comes to programming metcons, because I think a lot of us as coaches go into programming this stuff with an idea of what we think metabolic conditioning should look like based on our experience, based on terms that are thrown out there. We kind of talked a little bit about why, you know, that isn't the case already, but I think we just have to lose what we think is fun and enjoyable when it comes to aerobic work, and look at the client and think about what they need and let that guide the prescription.
Agreed. And I will add, just to end this, that I'm so serious about my BLGs that every episode I finish my water and Georgia always has a full glass.
You know what, guys? You get to listen to Carl's like gross little slurping sounds. I'm far more respectful. I don't want to make you guys listen to this.
I put my health and my longevity before your comfort, and you should do the same.
I'm going to go scull some water. Well, guys, thank you for listening in to this episode of Backroom Talk. As always, please make sure you subscribe, leave us a review on audio, and drop us a comment on YouTube. Thanks, guys.